I'm doing this show off the cuff, which, contrary to what you may believe, means I have notes.
History never repeats, but it does often rhyme. Vibe to the beat of History Go Time.
The evolution of language is deeply funky, and the term off the cuff has drifted so far from its original meaning that it now means the complete opposite of the original expression. So, what's up with that? The Oxford English Dictionary defines off the cuff as if from notes made off the shirt cuff, or, originally, extempore, on the spur of the moment, unrehearsed. So going off the OED, the phrase off the cuff appears to have two diametrically opposite definitions, which is confusing. Today we use the term off the cuff to denote something that was done without any forethought or preparation at all, ad libitum. For instance, Demo did his festival show off the cuff. But originally, the expression meant something completely different. It meant to use notes that you had meticulously prepared, notes that you'd made earlier. Off the cuff implied a degree of preparation, as opposed to extemporaneous. And that's quite the turnaround in definition, is it not? The Danish actually have a word for this process where definitions shift to their antonym, and the word they use is pendulord, or pendulum word or phrase, as in the definition swings like a pendulum, pendulord. I love that word. Thank you, Danes. Pendulord. And I was about to make a joke about how Pendulord sounds like a D-list Batman villain or something, but then I remembered that the Clock King actually exists and is a canonical Rogues Gallery Hall of Famer. That comic gets weird the closer you look at it. But what about off the cuff? How did that shift so dramatically in definition? Well, I want you to imaginate with me. Cast your mind back to the before times, the 19th, early 20th century, when everyone looked like a Colin Firth period drama. Are you imagining it? Do you see how immaculately dressed everyone is? Well, as you're probably imagining, immaculate is not easy. There are very few people alive today who would be able to recall a time before the invention of the washing machine. And that's a very good thing. Of all of the labor-saving technology that humans have come up with over the years, the washing machine has to be right up there in the pantheon of awesome things we've invented. And also, always remember stuff like this whenever you feel tempted to romanticize the past, because the past sucked, mainly because it didn't have things like washing machines. Without bogging us down too far in the process, something as simple as washing a shirt was an ordeal that took you all day, and not only was it time-consuming, it took a hell of a lot of effort too. It wasn't just a matter of throwing some washing in a tub and letting it soak. You had to agitate it yourself to get the dirt out. Washing clothes took a long time, and you spent the entirety of that time trying to punch your clothes clean. There was usually an entire day devoted simply to washing. It was often called Blue Monday, and the reasons behind why it's called Blue Monday is not for today, but it does find a fun etymological link between the band New Order and the now defunct rugby league team, the Newtown Jets, because history is a rich tapestry and everything is related. But back to off the cuff. So given how hard it was to wash even the most basic of items, people looked for ways to circumvent that process as much as possible. Now, what if, and I'm just spitballing here, what if you didn't have to wash the entire item of clothing? What if you only had to wash a little bit of it? As people were forced to wash these clothes over and over and over again, trends began to emerge. And one trend in particular, only certain parts of their shirts were getting dirty. Things don't get dirty uniformly. Uniforms tend to get dirty in the places where they see the most use. Now, obviously the working class were proper screwed here. It's hard to get coal dust out of your clothes and lungs. But for the white-collar crowd, well, the only part of their uniform that got dirty was the white collar. When you wear a full suit, only the collar and cuffs are visible. The rest is concealed by a jacket and a waistcoat. At least if you're dressed like a proper gentleman and not a podcaster. And if only these parts of the shirt are visible, then maybe that's the only part of the shirt that you actually need to clean. The rest can be safely hidden away from the judgmental stares of friends and neighbors. And so an entire industry was born out of the same method by which a teenager cleans their bedroom. Out of sight, out of mind. Cut every corner.
cut every corner, it is really not so bad.
Instead of laundering whole garments, enterprising tailors would sell paper collars and paper cuffs that you could wear over or in place of the real thing. And when these got dirty, instead of the painful and time-consuming process of washing them, one simply threw away the nasty used collars and cuffs and racked up a fresh set. Since this was at least 7 years before the invention of recycling, it was a wasteful process, but it was a hell of a lot easier than actually cleaning a shirt. So the trend caught on, and this is from the Saratogian newspaper in 2009. During the 1870s, a peculiar clothing fad swept the country. Disposable cotton-based paper collars were introduced to the upper classes as a way of maintaining a fresh, white collar rather than attempting to clean, soiled cloth collars. So there you have it. Meanwhile, advances in paper-making technology during the 19th century meant that paper was becoming far more common and significantly less expensive, meaning that it was no longer cost-inhibitive to do something as flagrant as making parts of a shirt out of disposable paper. And a niche market was born as paper mills found a surprising and often lucrative second income stream. And as it happened, one of the major centers for the manufacture of paper, at least in the United States of America where these things are documented, happened to be upstate New York. The city of Troy in New York State, as opposed to Troy from the Odyssey, is sometimes known as the Collar City due to several people from the area claiming to have invented the very concept of detachable collars and cuffs. Although, admittedly, my only citation for this comes from a place called the Albany Institute, and I'm just suspicious of that area because people from that area are known to call a hamburger a steamed ham, despite the fact that they are obviously grilled.
No, I said steamed hams.
Just saying you don't get that kind of thing in Utica.
Oh, not in Utica. No, it's an Albany expression.
I see.
Nonetheless, in the mid to late 19th century, upstate New York was the largest manufacturer of disposable shirt bits anywhere in the world, which is why the region claimed that the idea originated from that area, upstate New York, Troy. Several residents of Troy during the late 19th century claimed to have invented the very idea of disposable shirt parts, and given the number of conflicting reports, there's no consensus as to who may or may not have been telling the truth. However, given the rather surprising number of people who claim to have invented this rather niche apparel, there must be something in the water there. Mercury, I imagine, but somebody there did invent paper collars and cuffs. Now, one of the people who claimed to have invented the paper collar and paper cuffs was one Reverend Ebenezer Brown in the year 1875, although it is up for debate as to whether the good Rev actually did invent paper collars and cuffs or if he simply happened to look down at the paper collar he was already wearing when he had his fabulous idea. Clerical collars themselves were invented by Scottish Presbyterians in the year 1865, predating the good Reverend Ebenezer Brown's claim by a good decade. And also, always remember that it's only Presbyterian if it's from the Presbyterian region of Scotland, otherwise it is simply sparkling Episcopalian. But regardless of who invented them, the concept of not having to wash a shirt was incredibly popular, and paper collars and cuffs spread across the world like bat flu. In the year 1875 alone, just the Glen Paper Collar Company shipped over 21 million units of these things. And given that this was in the year 1875, the same year that Reverend Ebenezer Brown claimed to have invented the item in question, I am beginning to suspect that maybe the good Rev was telling fibbywibs, which is rather unlike a man of the cloth. Now, because these disposable bits meant that you didn't have to wash an entire shirt, it also meant that people who didn't have the means of washing entire shirts on the regular were now able to dress nicely. Previously, such tailoring was only available to the mega wealthy who had the money to employ staff simply to launder their clothes, a task which, if you'll recall, took a ridiculous amount of time and effort that rich people were more than happy to throw scalding pennies at poor people to provide. But now, the barrier to entry was a hell of a lot lower, and people from the middle class were able to get in on the action too. Students of all walks were able to dress like their fancier private-schooled peers. Journalists started suddenly looking sharp, and even lowlifes like, gasp, comedians got in on the act of scrubbing up. And this is where we begin to see the birth of the expression, off the cuff. Students, journalists, and comedians are three types of people who tend to take a lot of notes. Students, journalists, and vaudevillians, if you prefer, are three types of people who tend to need to look at these notes fairly regularly and often surreptitiously. A student might want to take a peek at their notes while taking an exam. A comedian might have a cheeky set list to glance at when the act goes south. A journalist might have to quickly jot down a quote before skewering a politician with their own words, because that's a real thing that used to happen once upon a time. If you wanted notes that were quite literally always at hand, you would scribble them down on your shirt cuffs. Hence, doing something off the cuff was to do it from notes that you had prepared earlier. Notes that you had quite literally written on your cuff. The term referenced a deliberate preparation. To be off the cuff was to have carefully considered your thesis. However, the march of time is relentless, and since laundry was such a menial chore for nearly everyone, of course it was going to be a priority to automate this process as much as possible. Each advancement in washing technology was welcomed, but the real game changer came at the dawn of the 20th century with the invention of the electric washing machine. Now, just an aside here, but if you were to search this topic with AI, then AI would very confidently tell you that the electric washing machine and tumbler was first patented by Alva Fisher in the year of 1908. But if you actually look at the patents themselves, you will realize that Oliver Woodrow patented the electric washer and tumbler weeks before Fisher, and that's a really easy thing to check. And why does AI get that wrong? What else might it be getting wrong? But regardless of who invented the electric washer, not Fisher, the invention of the electric washing machine and tumbler was also the death of the paper cuffs and collar industry. As real shirts became significantly easier to clean, the very reason for disposable parts disappeared virtually overnight. Reusable cuffs and collars, once a cost-effective convenience, were now a needless expense that could no longer be justified. People stopped buying them, and capitalism being what it is, factories stopped manufacturing them. Paper cuffs went the same way as vellum and dodos and critical thinking. They were a relic of a bygone era, and within a couple of short decades were largely forgotten by the world. Since cuffs were no longer a place to jot down ideas, and they hadn't been for some time, the original meaning of the expression off the cuff became skeuomorphic. The initial idea was lost and only the most tangential vestiges remained, like the save icon on your computer or using your thumb and pinky to indicate a phone call. We're all old. And so it was with things being off the cuff. There was a time after paper cuffs had gone extinct that the practice did continue, if briefly, where shirts would be so heavily starched that they acted somewhat like paper and you could still write things down on them, but even that died out, as writing on a real shirt was as silly back then as it is today. Which isn't to say that it wasn't done, but it just wasn't as common as paper cuffs used to be either. Once paper cuffs had been extinct for years, the institutional knowledge of them died too. People simply couldn't remember a time when it was common to write on your shirt. They lived in a world where writing on your shirt was something that you specifically did not do. It was wrong to do that. And so, without the reference, your cuffs were a place where you most certainly would not expect to find anything written. They were a place bereft of writing, a place where your mum would yell at you if you wrote anything at all. Your cuffs were very specifically somewhere without writing. And the meaning of the phrase off the cuff shifted commensurately. If you were doing something off the cuff, you were very specifically doing it without your notes. You were, much like a magician, demonstrating that you had nothing up your sleeve. You specifically did not have any pre-prepared notes. And so you were doing things off the cuff. Live, unprepared, ad libitum, extemporaneously, and that's what the term means today. But it can mean both things. Prepared and unprepared. A pendulord, if you will. And if you want to see both meanings in action at the same time, there's a rather left-field bit of media that demonstrates both positions at the same time. The 1936 Charlie Chaplin film Modern Times, which is a weird fever dream, and the film that the Joker watches in the movie Joker, well, Modern Times has this scene where Charlie Chaplin's iconic tramp character works as a singing waiter of all things. However, the tramp, with his trademark foolishness, keeps forgetting the lyrics to the songs he's supposed to sing. And his friend, played by Paulette Goddard, assists the tramp by writing the lyrics on his shirt cuffs, allowing him to perform off the cuff in the classical sense of having it written down. But the tramp being the tramp, he soon loses his shirt cuffs with the lyrics on them, and he is forced to improvise his songs, leading to a performance that is off the cuff in the modern sense of the term. Live and unprepared. So I guess if you want a ballpark for when the terminology began to shift from one meaning to another, I guess around the year 1936 when Modern Times came out. Charlie Chaplin always had his finger on the pulse. He's a sharp dude. And that's why off the cuff means what it does. Both prepared and unprepared. If this is something that you found interesting, I would appreciate it if you could hit some buttons on the way out. Any of the buttons are good to hit. The algorithm just likes it when you hit buttons, so please, if you could hit some buttons, I'd really appreciate that. If you like things that are like this, but you don't want to look at me, or if you just want to hear words which are banned on this platform, some of which would genuinely surprise you, I have a podcast with a couple of 100 episodes by now, so if you like this, then you probably like that. There's a link in the downspace, you know what to do. I also do the Patreon thing, like everyone else in this economy, but you know how that works by now. I'm not going to keep badgering you with it, so also link in the downspace. But there you have it. That's what off the cuff means. Hope you found that interesting.